Welcome back. You're watching Showdown. Now, shortly I'm going to be chatting to three very interesting politicians joining us out of Canberra. They're, of course, all back stuck there in the freezing cold that is Canberra at this time of year because they have no choice, because that's the career path that they chose. Now, Fiona Nash, representing the National Party. I'll be very interested to see what the Senator thinks in relation to some of the breakouts of ill discipline, is the way Liberals consider it. National Party consider it standing up for their own views on issues like maternity leave, issues like the baby bonus. It's been a commitment from Joe Hockey and Tony Abbott that they will remove the baby bonus entirely. And Nationals have been piping up about this. I haven't actually heard what Senator Fiona Nash has to say, so we'll be getting her thoughts on that. Now, as far as the tariff debate goes, this is an interesting one. It's been sparked in a sense by Nick Champion, who's a Labor member for Wakefield. He's out of South Australia. We all know, as I talked to Nick Xenophon about before the break, that in a sense the Holden industry coming out of South Australia, the heart of it being in South Australia, is now very much in danger as a result of what's happened to Ford with the planned closure of Ford. The trickle-down effect of that is going to have an impact on the South Australian economy. Indeed, it's going to have an impact on Nick Champion's electorate of Wakefield. So we'll be talking to him about that. He's come out and written some pretty strong opinion pieces about forms of protectionism that he would like to see put in place. Now, in a very stark contrast to that, Senator Scott Ryan for the Liberal Party, Shadow Parliamentary Secretary, has written an opinion piece just today in the Australian Financial Review saying that protectionism is not the answer. The three of them, I should say, join me now out of Canberra. Senator Scott Ryan and Nick Champion, thanks very much for your company.
Thanks, Peter.
And Senator Fiona Nash, welcome aboard as well. Thanks for your company.
Thanks, Peter.
Senator Nash, I'll start with you if I can. Right off the bat, I was going to have Barnaby Joyce on the program. Not to say I'm not happy to have you aboard, by the way, but I have this concern that he was pulled by the Leader's office. That was what was told to me. The reason being that they don't want him out here talking about the baby bonus. Now, luckily, good National that you are, putting your party first, you're happy to do so, hopefully. What is your view? There seems to be some dissent there about the baby bonus within the National Party and the plans to scrap it coming from Joe Hockey and Tony Abbott.
Well, firstly, I suspect that Barnaby's never been pulled off doing anything. If he's not here, I suspect there's an extremely good reason for it that doesn't have anything to do with the Leader's office pulling him out. Look, there's obviously been some discussion around the baby bonus. Tony Abbott brought this forward some time ago. I can certainly understand the workforce productivity issues that he talks about, particularly small businesses out in the region stand to benefit. There's some discussion around this. Always there is on many issues within the coalition, so that's not surprising.
All right, fair enough. But what's your view personally, though? I mean, in your opinion, do you think that the baby bonus shouldn't be scrapped if Tony Abbott's lucky enough to be elected Prime Minister?
I don't think the mechanism for making sure that there's some focus and support for stay-at-home mums, if you like, really matters, whether the baby bonus stays or goes. It's a long way till the election. I certainly would like to see some recognition for those mothers who choose to stay at home with their babies, with their young children. I was a stay-at-home mother for quite some time, so it's a long way to go to the election, and I think we'll have some discussions around that.
But where's the National Party left on this one if it's in a situation where the Liberal Party, which will obviously have the majority comfortably of coalition MPs, if they just overrule the National Party, you're not really in a position to do much about it? And where does it leave your frontbenchers who are bound by cabinet solidarity?
Well, as I say, we can certainly see the merits in the PPL that Tony's put forward by the way of the workforce productivity. I don't think there's a huge issue here. I think there's a lot trying to sort of beat it up into a big issue, but not for us. Certainly isn't.
All right, let me go across to you if I can, Senator Scott Ryan, and just to ask you before we get to tariffs, which we're going to mostly focus on, just quickly. Barnaby Joyce's office were happy enough to send me just a moment ago an example of the function invite that he had today. Now, it started at 6 p.m. Boy, oh boy, the Senator's planning to kick on. It's already 8:30.
I don't think anyone's ever succeeded in telling Barnaby that he can't actually sell his message to the people, and I've only known him 5 years. Barnaby's working hard. He's running for the seat of New England. And quite frankly, if he's out at functions meeting people, voters, businesses and stakeholders in that part of Australia, then, you know, that's probably more important than being here with us.
It's a hell of a function, if I can ask you, Nick Champion, isn't it? It started at 6 p.m. 8:30 and still going. It's for the Liberal for Canberra person running for Canberra, Tom Sefton.
Well, look, I think, you know, the Nats and the Libs say that Barnaby can't be silenced, but it's quite plain that Barnaby's largely disappeared from public view. And the reason for this is not just that he's busy running for a lower house seat, it's basically that he's a liability and he's likely to speak his mind if you ask him a question. So that's why he's not on tonight.
But he hasn't been silenced from public view. I mean, in fairness to Barnaby, he was on the page 3 across the hamper top of the Australian defying the Liberal Party on the baby bonus.
Yeah, and if he came on this program, then he'd be doing the same, and they don't want to see that. They don't want you to have a philosophical argument out in the open, about this matter, because it's masking. Well, it's become the proxy for the great philosophical tension within the Liberal Party, which is now between free market, free traders like Scott. Free marketeers like Scott and the sort of DLP national Santa Maria crowd, which have slowly but surely invaded the ranks of the Liberal Party.
I think we've got to let Nick take a breath here, because only someone from a capital city would actually say that someone's disappeared from view because they're campaigning for a seat in regional Australia. Sort of betrays Labor's mindset at the moment. I went to the same school as Bob Santa Maria, so I don't know.
That is a nice line, Senator. That is a nice line, Senator. But let me ask you, it's a legitimate question, isn't it, that you know you're going to win government in less than 100 days' time. I know that you won't be as sure of it as I am, but I'm certainly sure of it. You'll win, and you'll win comfortably. Now, when you do, there will be tensions there with the National Party, even just from what Senator Fiona Nash just said a moment ago in relation to the baby bonus.
Well, I'm not going to let your presumption go past without comment there, Peter. You know, we've only come from opposition to government 3 times in the history of our party, and that we're 75 years old, so we don't underestimate the task ahead of us. But, you know, another word for what you're describing there is diversity. There is strength in the coalition because of the diversity. And I'm not going to be lectured about internal tensions from a member of the Parliamentary Labor Party that for the last 5 years has torn itself apart in public over and over again.
Nick Champion, that is hard to argue with, I've got to say. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that there are going to be some interesting philosophical divisions between the National Party and the Liberal Party, and you know, the Leader's Office's intervention, even if Barnaby already had a function that he decided he wanted to spend 3 hours hanging out at, nonetheless is something that that pales into insignificance, doesn't it, compared to what we've seen on your side of the Parliament over the last 4 or 5 years?
Well, one thing we're all agreed on in the Labor Party is that paying very wealthy people $75,000 a year while you pay people on the minimum wage, you know, 30 grand, is palpably unfair. If the government was to implement such a scheme, that would be very unfair. And if you were to fund it with a corporate tax that would flow through to every every shopping centre, every price in the economy, then that would be amazingly stupid.
Let me ask
Senator Fiona Nash about this.
Let me ask Senator Fiona Nash about this. Do you agree with Nick Champion that that amount of money would be palpably unfair? Darren Chester, your National Party colleague, does take that view.
Oh, look, I think to be fair, Darren made some comments about having everything on the table when it came to assistance for families having children between now and the election. So I think, to be fair, we need to look at exactly what he said and not paraphrase what he said. Look, we've had some discussions around the area of stay-at-home mums, of working mums. I can certainly understand where Tony Abbott is coming from when he's put forward the paid parental leave, saying in terms of workforce productivity, there has to be a recognition of these mothers who are working, taking time out, who make an enormous contribution to the nation and the economy, and that needs to be recognised. I can understand what he says, but at the same time, I can understand that we need to look at stay-at-home mums as well.
But what's your view? Do you think, I can see the point as well, but do you think that a working woman receiving $75,000 for 6 months off work from the government is fair at the same time as a stay-at-home mum, like you say you were, you know, once upon a time, not receiving the $3,000 as it currently stands, which has already been dropped from $5,000 under the plans of Joe Hockey?
Well, I've spoken to a lot of women, Peter, out there in the community, and they are very, very supportive of what Tony's put forward. They actually see the merit in it, and they are very supportive of what he's put forward. But I suppose I've done both, Peter. I've been a stay-at-home mum, I've been a working mum, so I see it from both sides, and that's why I think we need to look at both types of families, both types of mums. We need to make sure working mums are recognised, and we need to make sure those stay-at-home mums are recognised as well.
All right, stay with us. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to start with Nick Champion. How can such a young man, a new member of the Labor Party, be such a dinosaur on tariffs? We'll ask him. Back in a moment.
Think about this. What if the car you buy today could actually save you money in the years ahead? Buy a new Holden before the end of the financial year and get 5 years roadside assist, plus a 5-year warranty, plus your first standard service free. Just think, no surprises, no uncertainty, no worries when you buy a new Holden, like the Captiva 5 from $25,990 with an electric sunroof and 18-inch alloys. Get all this today, plus value you'll appreciate tomorrow. That's another reason to think Holden.
Did you know many Australian men and women experience incontinence? I could, and you'd never know. Because I'd wear New Depend Real Fit, and you'd never know. Want me to prove it? New Depend Real Fit is so like real underwear, you won't believe it till you feel it on. It's made from incredible cotton flex fabric and designed for discretion. Believe me, go to depend.com.au for your free sample and take the field test today.
I heard you blokes finish up the other night. You're right. It's huge. Michael, go and get your old man a beer, would you?
Michael, are those snacks ready yet?
In a minute, love. How'd you blokes finish up after the other night, eh? You're right. Oh, Jake, go get your old man another beer, would you?
Kids form their attitude to alcohol long before they ever have a drink themselves, from their most important role model, you.
An APT Canada and Alaska holiday is a royal experience.
We didn't need to do anything but enjoy ourselves.
Let APT treat you like royalty. Book now and you'll fly free. Call APT or your travel agent today.
I wouldn't travel with anyone else.
Hi there, Kitty from Progressive Car Insurance. Here to let you know that we're 100% online, which means less overheads for us and more savings for you.
Ready to save? Visit progressiveonline.com.au.
G'day, it's Clarky. Clark Rubber's fabulous new comfort range of sleep solutions is available now. And to celebrate, we're taking 15% off all pillows in the comfort range. 15% off all pillows? How good is that? But hurry, have fun at Clark Rubber.
Looking for your kind of holiday? With a little space and freedom? Welcome to Australia by Big Four, where you can enjoy things your way, at your own pace. Experience the best of Australia. And share more of what holidays are really about. Check out Australia by Big Four. Visit big4.com.au.
This is Sky News.
This program brought to you by the Audi Quattro Drive end of financial year sale. Visit your preferred Audi dealer or audi.com.au today.
Welcome back. You're watching Showdown, where I'm talking to Senator Fiona Nash for the National Party, as well as Senator Scott Ryan for the Liberal Party and Nick Champion for the Labor Party. Now, Nick, let me start with you. I did mention your position on tariffs. You've been writing about it, causing a bit of a stir. What's going on? Is this just straight-out state parochialism and you have to defend tariffs, or do you actually ideologically think that this is a realistic way to go as opposed to a backward way to go, given the way that, that free trade has been developing over the last 10 or 20 years?
Well, neither, Peter. I mean, I made the practical observation that we face a new situation, and one that we largely haven't, found in the last 40 years of free trade orthodoxy, and that's where we've got a floating currency, and normally it goes up and down. In the Howard years, it was down as low as 48 cents, which was great news for the car industry. They exported, Monaros and rebadged Pontiacs to the United States during that period. Obviously, now we've got a very high dollar, and it's high for a reason that is beyond the economic fundamentals of the economy. So commodity prices have come off, but for the first time our dollar hasn't followed those commodity prices, and instead it's stayed high because central banks from around the world and foreign currency speculators have invested in Australian assets and in the Australian dollar, and that's kept the Australian dollar artificially high.
Very
now, this
direct
is a problem.
question, though. Can I just ask a very direct question? Would tariffs have saved Ford?
Sorry?
Would tariffs have saved Ford, in your view?
Well, no, because Ford did not have an export model. But what I thought, I wrote about this before the sad demise of domestic production at Ford. But what I was trying to alert people to is this situation where our dollar's very high, and not for good economic fundamentals, but rather because of speculation, and because we've become something of a safe currency in world markets. And secondly, we've got nearly all of our major competitors, Germany, the US, and Japan, printing money like mad, which lowers their currencies to an abnormal level. Now, that's creating a hyper-competitive market, and under World Trade Organisation rules, we have every right to impose a short-term tariff to protect the fundamentals of our car industry, to prevent massive short-term dislocation. And that's that's the argument I was making, not for endless years of protection, not for inefficiency, but rather for a short-term, pragmatic tariff to help industry get through what is an abnormal situation.
Senator Scott Ryan, how do you respond to that suggestion right there by Nick Champion?
Well, I agree with his analysis of some of the problem. The dollar's high. It's making life difficult for exporters, particularly of manufactured goods. We have got other countries, printing money effectively to lower the value of their currencies. But he's diagnosing the solution to that will actually harm Australia. No one can explain how making a Mazda 3, the second most popular car in Australia, $1,000 or $2,000 more expensive, helps anyone. It's as if the other side's cheating, so I'll put some lead in my saddlebag so it's harder for us as well.
Well, I think his argument, I might be verbal in him, Senator, but I think his argument is that it helps those workers that would otherwise lose their jobs, that are trying to compete against the less expensive Mazda because of the high dollar.
Well, let's go and look at this. Does anyone think, I mean, Nick, I think, proposed a tariff of about 5%, or it might have been some of his colleagues, if the dollar was below, it was 96 cents or above. It dropped below that today. So let's say we make a Mazda 3 $1,000 more expensive with a 5% tariff. We already pay a 5% tariff on it. That is not going to do anything to save Ford or realistically Holden. The issue we've got here is our manufacturers need to be competitive. Now, we've had transition plans in place with the support of both sides of politics to try and enable our manufacturers to compete since the days of the button car plan. But the point about tariffs is they don't work. 30 or 40 years ago, in the early 1970s, our dollar was well above $1 US. And then by the 1980s, we had tariffs in the order of 80%, the most inefficient car industry in the world, and one that went through a great deal of adjustment. The piece I wrote this morning was a personal story, because my dad was one of those people that lost his job in the 90s when there was change in the automotive sector. He worked in the trucking industry. Tariffs don't work, and they're a bit like budget deficits when people say we need some stimulus spending. They say they're temporary, but once they come on, they don't go away.
Nick Champion, is the Senator right? Do tariffs not work along the lines that you're talking? He says that they wouldn't have saved Ford. You agree with that? He says they probably wouldn't save Holden. I assume you disagree with that.
Well, I think it's a nonsense. The rest of the world use tariffs for the precise reason that they do work, and they do protect industry. And if you make imports more expensive, it means that people are more likely to buy an Australian-made car. Now, I do agree with Scott.
Is that fair to the consumer, though? Sorry to interrupt, but is that fair to the consumer? I mean, that's what Scott Ryan's getting at there. How are people better off if these cheap cars that are affordable are suddenly not affordable and they have to buy an expensive Australian-made car, even if there are obviously manufacturing workers that will benefit by holding on to their jobs because of it?
Well, it's a delicate balance, and I mean, I wouldn't support going back to a 57% tariff, which is the highest car tariff that we had. That would plainly be detrimental to consumer interest. But I think there is a good argument that, and I think most Australians accept it, that in times like these we should protect Australian industry, because there will come a time when the mining boom comes off and when our dollar comes down, and we'll look to our manufacturers to export again, and that's the sort of time where Holden will roar back, roar back into action, exporting things like police cars to the United States, exporting, large luxury sedans to the Middle East. And then we'll all be crowing about their success. And you do need manufacturing as your base in an economy, because it generates investment, it generates jobs, it generates research and development, it's really, in terms of southern Australia, in terms of Victoria and South Australia, it's been the heart of our economies. To lose Holden from South Australia would cause a recession, because it would rob us of up to 16,000 jobs and, literally, a couple of percentage points of gross state product.
Let's just be honest here. South Australia's a boring state. People leave there mostly for that reason. But Fiona Nash, let me ask you, from the National Party's perspective, you're a senator representing the National Party. Where do you fall on this debate? Because Scott Ryan took aim at the Labor Party in his piece today, but he also had a crack at your former leader, Blackjack McEwen. The National Party have historically been pretty supportive of tariffs, and even a number of your colleagues now have a similar view.
What a great leader Blackjack was too. Scott and I have certainly had discussions over the years on our views on this, but my view on this is pretty simple. I get sick and tired, Peter, of watching this Labor government pick and choose which workers and which industries they say they're going to support. Now, when you look at the agricultural sector, the ag sector and flow-on industry, it's about 12% of GDP, contributes about $155 billion to the nation's economy, and yet we hear not a peep from this Labor government about anything in terms of support for those farmers, for that agricultural sector, which is facing exactly the same problems as the car industry because of that high Australian dollar. And we have to remember, when the GFC first hit in the first quarter, it was agriculture that actually held up the nation. So my view is I get sick and tired of this Labor government being so city-centric and paying absolutely no attention to what we need in rural Australia.
So your concerns is that the Labor government is too city-centric, so you would like a coalition government to be a bit more country-focused?
Oh, well, I think a coalition government would absolutely be more rural Australia focused. There's no doubt about that. The Nationals exist to be there for rural Australia, and within the coalition would be far better for rural Australia than this Labor government. And I think when you look at things like the carbon tax, when you look at the Snap Live export ban that decimated the north of Australia, that the Prime Minister referred to earlier this year as short-term pain, there is absolutely no doubt that a Liberal National government would be much better for rural Australia.
Scott Ryan, you were wanting to say something a moment ago?
I just wanted to say, what Nick is walking away from here is 30 years of economic reform that the Labor Party, as John Howard and Peter Costello and Tony Abbott have said, had a very important role in. One of the reasons our economy has weathered global financial storms has been the change that occurred when we undertook the economic reform program of the 80s and 90s. And critical to that was the lowering of tariffs, and critical to that was freeing up internal markets. We wouldn't have the mining boom we do today if we still had the old protected industries, because all our labour and capital would be tied up in unproductive places. I agree entirely with Fiona. The Country Party was actually first established as a free trade party. The leaders of the free trade movement in the 80s in Australia were the National Farmers Federation.
Oh, but they've morphed
and National
since then,
Party
be
people
honest,
like
Senator,
John
they've
Anderson,
morphed
Tim
since
Fisher.
then.
No, but the National Farmers Federation, Tim Fisher, John Anderson, these were all committed to it because they all, I'll finish, answer your question next, Peter, because they all understood that it was regional Australia that for decades was bearing the cost of protection that benefited the cities. That was one of the great inequities in Australia, that regional Australia paid the price for tariffs.
But what about Barnaby Joyce?
Oh, Barnaby, I had lots of discussions with Barnaby. I've never heard him actually say we should reimpose tariffs. This would be a retrograde step, and just because Nick says the rest of the world does it, it harms the rest of the world. Tariffs are economic self-harm. They are proven to cause costs to the people that impose them. I wish other people would reduce them, but I know that we are better off when we don't have them, regardless of what others do. And Australia's strength over the last 30 years is testament to that.
Nick Champion, can I just ask you a question? We've had a tweet that's come in somebody, I think they're being serious, they say, why don't we just change Australian road rules to allow centre-wheel drive vehicles only? That way Australian-made cars would dominate on the roads. That sounds like the kind of thing I could imagine the Labor Party adopting.
It's a bit of a weird tweet, but look, just getting back to what Scott said, look, no coalition government has ever cut tariffs. It's been the Whitlam government and the Keating government that cut tariffs, and Howard had tariffs at 10%, and it didn't harm the economy greatly. That's all I was talking about, returning the tariff to Howard government levels. So I find that, you know, sort of the hysterics about turning our faces against economic reform to be a little overblown. What I'm talking about is dealing with a short-term problem in a practical way, and I think the problem with many of the free traders, and you read them on the the pages of the Australian Financial Review, and they've got the modest member column, is we've got a bunch of people trying to hark back to a battle that's largely been won. We are a free trading nation, but we've got to be a practical one, and if we want to keep a car industry, we've got to give them assistance. That's just the rules. The rest of the world,
and we give them assistance in different ways.
That's just the rules the rest of the world play by.
We are giving them assistance in different ways. What Nick is arguing for here, let's be honest, what Nick is arguing for is for everyone that chooses a car that suits their needs, thousands of dollars.
I didn't interrupt you.
Thousands of dollars in extra taxes they have to pay. That's what Nick's proposing.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on, guys. We've only got less than 3 minutes left on program. So something else that I'm sure you'll agree on: Gonski and the education reforms. What's going on, Scott Ryan? It seems like Barry O'Farrell is the worst friend that a federal Liberal opposition leader could have in terms of his attitude on Gonski versus your attitude in terms of not wanting states to sign on.
No, I wouldn't agree with your contention there at all, Peter. I've been in Senate estimates yesterday and today, and yesterday we couldn't even get some basic answers out of the Department of Prime Minister about the so-called Gonski reforms. This has clearly been sort of a political campaign by the government, and when you ask for detail, as the New South Wales Education Minister was here in Canberra today doing, that people don't seem to be able to get hold of it.
Was New South Wales just crazy to sign on then without all the detail that you're talking about? Because they've already signed on, even though they haven't got that detail you speak of.
Oh no, they do what they deem as the interests of their state. That's why we have a federation, Peter.
Yeah, but you're saying that there's not enough detail there, yet somehow they've signed on. Would you have signed on if you were in their position?
I don't run state schools, I don't run a school system, and I don't think Canberra should, Peter. I'm in federal politics. What the state politicians do, entirely up to them, they know their school system better. The questions we have as federal politicians around guarantees and funding levels, guarantees particularly for people who choose non-government schools for their children, we are not confident in.
All right, Senator Fiona Nash, let me ask you before we run out of time, what's your view on this? Because at the end of the day, you have to pick. It's black and white, don't you? Either Barry O'Farrell did the right thing by New South Wales in terms of his decision to sign on to Gonski, or he did the wrong thing, in which case, at a federal level, you guys are right to not like the Gonski reforms. Which one is it?
No, it's not black and white at all, Peter. I'd completely disagree with you there. Certainly Barry O'Farrell and Adrian Piccoli, the State Minister, have worked through a number of models and looked at the figures in how it applies to New South Wales. Now, they are perfectly at liberty to look at how they think it will work for their state. Our job as federal parliamentarians, as the federal coalition, we have to look at it in terms of, as a national plan, how is this going to roll out? How would this actually work? There's still a lot of detail missing, as Scott referred to. Now, Christopher Pyne is quite correct when he says if it's not a national plan, we're not going to sign up to it. So we've got to make sure we've got the detail that we need as the coalition to make the right decision from a national perspective. What New South Wales has done has based their decision, as rightly they should, and any side of government should do this, on how their state is affected by how this particular program will roll out.
All right, Fiona Nash, you got the last word. We are right out of time. Thanks very much for joining us on Showdown. Same to you, Senator Scott Ryan and Nick Champion as well. Appreciate your company. Thanks for watching. Barnaby Joyce is back from his function, I hear, so thanks for tuning in at the last minute. See you next week.